So we didn't get 3, meaning 1 guy per shift. What we want to do is use this person as a day person. That way he's there every day to work with all 3 of the shifts so that our staffing's maintained, whether somebody's on a day off or sick leave or what have you, or on a call. So that would give us, if we do it that way, after we sat down with myself and my 2 assistant chiefs and laid out the game plan, that would give us enough to cover 2 calls with the staffing we have without having to page the volunteers or pay overtime initially. Right now, we have enough, we cover 1 ambulance call, and if a second call comes in, we page everybody. What this would allow us to do, because that ambulance goes on transfers quite a bit, so it's gone. So then we're down to calling everybody all the time. This would allow us to have a second ambulance call and still maintain those response rates times that we've achieved and done so well with, from 48-second response, from 9-minute response, and getting a patient 3 minutes, things like that. That would allow us enough to handle 2 calls at the same time without having to call everybody in as well. But this person would be in charge then of our inspection program, work with Jan on the liquor inspection stuff. They would be in charge of the school inspections, daycares, flammable liquids, the jail, new construction. They would assist with all that stuff. This would also be our confined space program person to take care of confined space, all our special operations stuff, water rescue, which we were just in the river this weekend on a water rescue call, and all the special ops stuff that we do. And this person would allow another person in the rotation, because what we've been doing right now, guys, is we have 6 shift people. If one of those shift people takes a day off, which is 24 hours, then myself or one of the 2 assistant chiefs cover that 24 hours, so we're not paying overtime. This would give us another guy in that rotation to take a shift night, because he's salaried. If he works 100 hours, he works 100 hours. If he works 80 hours in a pay period, he works 80, to help break that up a little bit, so the 3 of us aren't constantly doing that to cover for vacation time, sick leave, personal days, and that sort of thing as well. If we're all there during the workday, there's enough people then to cover 2 ambulance calls at once, which we have quite a bit. I was in a meeting with Jacob the other day, and we had 2 calls while I was sitting in his office and I had to leave. So that happens more and more every day because we're trying to fulfill those transfers. 14 trips to Sioux Falls a month, a trip to Omaha, things like that. That first ambulance is gone for quite a bit of time. This will allow us a chance to cover that second call as well. So I have enough, or I should have enough, more than enough to cover that 12.6 out of this current budget. So basically, yes, we'd have to use a couple more days of reserve, or a day of reserve extra July 1, but then July 1 we'd put it right back, an in and out thing. And Jacob can touch more on the finance stuff. That's his expertise, and he's run the numbers. So I guess we're at the point here of the fire rescue asking for your help a little bit to help our operational side. I don't expect you guys to understand all the operational side or try to manage that. That's my job. But this would make it work the best, where that one person is working every shift, instead of just sticking him on one shift and he works 24 hours and he goes home and we don't have him the next day. So this would be one of the 3. So if next year you say, Chief, we're going to give you the other 2 people, or we're going to let you write a grant, or we're going to give you 1, or whatever, this person, this position could always go back to a shift to cover one of those 3 spots we're looking for. So pull them off days, put them back on shift, if we have all 3 that we need next year or whenever, or through attrition in the next 3 or 4 years, if that battalion chief would move to assistant chief as Mike retires, or chief as I retire, and then it's gone. And you go back to just filling the 3 shifts like we want, with 3 individuals each. But I think the best utilization of one person would be to be able to use them every day. And that helps us out immensely with response time, and not paying extra overtime or paying volunteer fees and having those people have to leave work as much.
You have somebody on the staff now that...
Yeah, so what we would do, Steve, is we would do this as kind of like a promotion to that position, so to speak, and then we'll still hire the low-paying firefighter position like Jacob had budgeted for, to put on shift. Because a new guy that we get, more than likely, depending on where they come from, might not have a paramedic license, might not have a firefighter license that we have to train, won't know the streets in town. So it isn't like we can throw them on a day shift and say, hey, take over if the fire chief's gone today, or the assistant chief. Where a battalion chief kind of is that position on our department, guys, that's the jack of all trades. He can cover shifts for a battalion chief that's gone or a firefighter that's gone, but he can also step up to cover an assistant chief spot if an assistant chief's gone. So that's kind of the flotation there of having him during the work week on days, and then still come in on weekends for calls or nights for big calls or cover shifts because it's salaried, just like you have with the 3 chief officers right now. And then as we grow, as we are with more calls and more requests for services, we see down the road that if we get those other 2 that I originally asked for this year, this battalion chief position goes back on shift. So there's 3 on each shift, and you still have your 3 chiefs like we do now. That's kind of the thought process.
Okay, so all right, so I wanted to make sure that this was, that we weren't going from 12 to 13.
Correct, and we're not.
Okay, I mean, so you cleared that.
Thank you.
But, okay, so if and when the other 2 come on board to get to that 12 that you guys
Right.
had initially talked about when we did this, once those 2 are approved, this position is going away and that person is moving back down?
Could go back to shift. Still be a battalion chief, but be on shift.
Okay.
So that position wouldn't be the day position every day anymore, Jason, because we'd have a guy on each shift to make up for that. So we'd have 3 on
Still have the title, but would be taken
shifts.
shifts.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is one of the 3 to answer your question on. I'm not looking for 13 now, I'm still at the 12.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I think that was, to me, that was the bigger question. 12 has always been out there as a number, ideal number to make the rotation work.
Right.
I just wanted clarification that by doing this, it didn't all of a sudden make it 13 as the desired number.
And that is correct. And if we don't get 2 next year and we keep moving along the way we are in this position's a day position for the next 4 or 5 years, you're gonna see 1 or 2 retirements where then through attrition you could phase this position out because that DC could become an AC or get promoted again, and then you're back to just your 3 shifts of 3. But we looked at the numbers, Jacob, and I don't know, I mean, the way it's trending right now, there should be plenty of money left over, hopefully to offset this cost. So it's gotta come out of reserves, but it goes right back in same day, out of this year's budget. We've got so many donations this year, and I can't thank the public enough that I've been able to offset operating costs with donations for buying EMS equipment and supplies and things from people that have made personal donations. So we've been doing really well compared to other years on operating costs.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure. So yes, he's still gaining a person,
Correct.
which essentially the council during the budget talks okayed the person rather than the 3. But we need to realize that since that time, the cost has gone up of that person.
So you could handle 2 ambulance calls at once just during the day, or
Mhm.
all the time?
No, just during the day.
Just during the day.
Yep. And that's when we're short on volunteers, Brian. As you know, people can't leave work and,
Right.
you know, we run into go to Sioux Falls, it's a 3-hour trip. It's a little hard to leave work, or if we get 2 or 3 calls a day, you know, we want those volunteers to be able to come to the house explosion. I don't want to pull them in for every little call, and that's what this group, this full-time group takes care of initially, and that helps a lot. Helps a lot to keep volunteers and helps a lot to keep employers happy as well, because their people aren't leaving 3 times a day and stuff. So that's what this would add to. And then it also gives us another person to help with inspections. We got a lot of construction coming up again, and a lot of downtown remodeling to take place and things like that. And then our confined space program continues to grow. Wells now has given us all their confined space, which we didn't do theirs before. They had their own rescue team, and now we are their rescue team. Ferraro Rochelle has started to dump the risk management stuff off, so we're picking up some of that. And if that continues, I talked to Jacob a little bit, you know, if we start to have to do all their hazmat and some of that stuff, then we'll need to negotiate with them on some more funding even towards staffing to help take care of them. So that's another avenue down the road for some income as well. So I guess that's where we're at to, yes?
I'm looking at one of your recent monthly reports. Would it be possible for you to adjust line items in the fire rescue calls line for when that second ambulance gets kicked in? You say there's been more and more. It might be useful to document it so we can all watch that, the success of this position that way.
Yeah, and you know, this will help too, Mike, with what we talked about with response times. That second ambulance is gonna get out of the building as fast as the first one. So if you're the first call or the second call, you're still getting treated the same, so to speak, or getting the same response. So that would be a benefit to making this a day spot too.
And I think Mike was asking, can you just reflect that in your reports?
Absolutely,
So-
yeah, we keep track, and unfortunately lately, we've had third calls, 3 at the same time. About half a dozen times since first of the year, we've had all 3 ambulances out at once. The other night it was 1:30 in the morning and all 3 of them were out, so it's happening more and more.
I think it'd be good for all of us to remain aware of that.
Okay, absolutely, sir.
Are the transfers you do, are they an emergent situation usually? Or is it-
Some are, some aren't. You know, with having a Vera affiliated hospital, we do a lot to Sioux Falls now, other than Sioux City, because that's the affiliation. But our hospital does a great job with what they have for capabilities. We've added ventilators now in our ambulances. So we got those through a grant. They were $22,000 a piece. We have 3 of them. All 3 ambulances have one. We can actually put people on a ventilator, basically life support, and transport them now. So we're getting more transports that way to where it might have been a life flight call before for our citizens. And we're doing so much more now with that. So it just seems on average 10 to 14 a month to Sioux Falls or to Omaha. Those are revenue makers for us, but we're taking care of our citizens as well. But yeah, we get a lot of those now, a lot of them.
So the non-emergency ones, are they flexible with you as far as if you say, hey, can we wait until?
Yeah, it
5
depends
o'clock?
on the nurse and how full ER is, you know. The other night we were up there and all 8 rooms were full. They were shipping people out and wanted them out to make room. But normally on a non-emergent, we've done where we've ran to Sioux City, come back, taken another one to Sioux City, come back, went to Sioux Falls, came back. Yeah, if they're not emergent or they're going up for some kind of specialty surgery or something that's scheduled, but they have to go in an ambulance because maybe they're not ambulatory or something like that. Yeah, they work real well with us scheduling around that. So we're putting a lot of miles on that transfer ambulance. So yeah, but you look at 600,000-700,000 of revenue too, which is a nice thing. But the more important thing to me is we're taking care of our taxpayers. That's why they're paying taxes, for us to take care of them. So we're trying to do that.
Almost sounds to me like we should have a designated ambulance for transfer.
We do, right now we do.
No, but I mean, that's its job.
That's basically what one of our rigs does. The problem I have now is that rig is the middle-aged one, because it's a decent rig. It's catching the old one on mileage. So what we're gonna do is pull the old one back into the transfer mode to get the mileage more separated apart, so when we go to replace them, you got some trade-in value and things like that. But the next ambulance we buy, Clark, is exactly what you're talking about. It will be strictly a transfer ambulance to put miles on.
So help me out here a little bit in the, it seems to me, I'm not a fire person, I'm not an EMS person, but it seems to me like there's a lot of titles. There's a lot of titles.
Okay.
Battalion chief, I don't know all that stuff. Is that something that's evolved recently? Because I mean, if I go back 6 years, we didn't have that. We had a chief, assistant chief, we had a ambulance person, and so I'm not by any way dishing your, but it just seems that we have all these titles, and like, who cares what the name of the guy is on a shift versus
Well,
he's still
each-
the same guy, but if you give him this title, he can be on this shift, and
Each-
Maybe I'm the slow one here.
Well, it's kind of like military clerk, it's a military type organization,
I
so
figured that.
each title has different responsibilities and different levels of training and certifications. So if you're a battalion chief, more than likely you have officer command leadership training. You also have your paramedic training, you also have your fire instructor training. So there's different certifications with each title. So that's how that's broke down. So in the past, when we had a chief and an assistant chief, on the volunteer side, we also had so many captains, so many lieutenants, which we still try to have some of those positions. And they're expected to have more training than your brand new firefighter. So that's kind of how that plays out in the rank and file. And with that comes more responsibility. So if you're a battalion chief that's gonna have this day job, you're gonna be in charge of that confined space program and making sure the billing gets sent out and collected and making sure our equipment stays up to date and the training gets done on it. And so there's all different levels of certifications and training with those titles.
Okay, so I'm the slow one in the crowd here, and I'm gonna ask, so what does the pay grade matter if you have an individual that is qualified to fill this position, but if you make him this pay grade, he's still qualified to fill, I'm not tracking.
So what we did with this is we looked at, right now it's an hourly position with overtime. What we're gonna do is put it at a salaried position, straight, this is your pay period. And that way we can work as many hours as we need to, and we're not paying the overtime. So that's the only difference between this battalion chief position and the 3 on shifts.
Okay.
And that way, just like me, you get as many hours as you need, and you're not paying the time and a half, which saves us some money as well. And then if he does work a shift, he's salary, we're not paying him 24 hours of overtime either, which saves on our overtime budget. I mean, we lowered our overtime budget from 80 to 60, looking at this position to hopefully keep that in check as well, that we're not giving as much overtime. Because I think, wasn't our original budget, Jacob, we had the overtime at 80? Was it 80?
I don't remember.
70 or 80,
I think,
put it
I
to
think
60.
that went down by 10.
10,000, okay, 70 to 60.
What are your thoughts on it? I mean, I read your email.
Yeah, so I sent that email out earlier, just to give you guys a heads up that we'd be talking about it. From an HR standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think if you're just gonna add one individual, I think you need to do it right. And I think to do it right would be to make it the battalion chief fire marshal salary position. It's a little frustrating on the financial side because we already are facing a deficit. We're normally we'd be setting the hearing for the budget by now. And so it's late in the game. But just because it's late in the game, I don't know if that means we should just say, no, we're not gonna do it. Cause I think in other discussions and committee meetings and stuff, council really talked about, well, if we're gonna do something, let's do it right. And so I think adding one person, this is probably the right way to do it.
And I'm okay with it as long as it, this person remains one of the 12,
Yes,
And not two up.
and not in addition to the 12.
Right.
right.
Well, I mean, okay, I mean, I like to listen to all the reasons why and why not. I mean, initially I was against it. I harken back to Mike's thumbs up today, which is, you know, when we do something like this, it affects next year and his ability to give a thumbs up next year for this is the 6th year in a row, you know, been tax hawks and property tax hawks. So these are ongoing effects.
Correct.
And when we start adding people and we start adding, you know, this is stuff that just comes right back next year as an increase. And so that's a concern of mine. But,
That's a very useful comment, Clark, because I purposely didn't mention that we have to be wary to create the expectation that we're always going to stay at 11.5, whatever it is, or something like that. This doesn't mean we're trying to run this city on the cheap. We're just managing. The fact that the levy is gonna have to change at some point in time, especially since we haven't had to make any adjustments to the realities of inflation, just because of that.
Right.
Yeah, I think the citizens should be as aware as we are that, it will have to change, and this might be one of the reasons, there'll be several others that will be head scratchers for us, but, we commend how it's worked in the past, but we can't expect that to go forever, if only to next year.
And this is what we, we look at that too. We're all in this as a team together to make this work. And just looking at it this year, I thought, well, this would make this systematically work for our response times and our responses and use of the department and use of this one person, so that if next year things aren't as good and we don't get 2 more people, that we're still able to take care of our citizens and provide our services. And this hopefully will keep our overtime in check, so that, next year you're not saying, Shipper, how come you had 100,000 in overtime? We're trying to keep all that in check by using salaried people, volunteers and things to offset costs.
What are you budgeted for overtime? I'm just curious.
60,
60?
yeah. I think we dropped it from 70 or 80 to 60 this year. So, we're trying to keep all that in check, and we never know. The other problem we have, guys, is we never know how many calls we're gonna get.
No, of course
I can't, that volunteer salaries and overtime and things is a dart throw, because this year was 1,795 calls, and next year might be 15, might be 2,000. Right now, we're on track at 1,900, so you just don't know how that's gonna play out, as people need you, so.
That brings up the under budget for this year. Do you feel confident, Jacob, in that's gonna happen?
Yeah, so I looked at both, the expense side and the revenue side, because revenues haven't been tracking as high as we had budgeted. And so on net, so between the two, we're 17,000 under budget right now.
Okay.
And I would anticipate that to continue on
In the active budget right now, you mean?
in the active budget right now.
And I honestly think, gentlemen, that'll be more than the 17. Our revenues always track a little slower on our rural funding and our fire fees, and our ambulance billing's always a month behind. But